Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. On this Sunday, we are blessed that on this particular day, the calendar is such that we commemorate the holy Moscow Patriarchs and Bishops of the Church. We have put out an icon of them, and I would like to tell you a little bit about one particular one. His name is Innocent, Saint Innocent of Alaska and Moscow. In 1996, we were very fortunate to be attending the month-long missionary school at Pacey's Abbey in California, run by Abbot Harmunk Herman. And on that those particular weeks, we had an unexpected visit from the great-grandson of Saint Innocent, who was also called Innocent, Father Innocent. It was very soon after Perestroika when the Russian doors were open and people could to some extent move around, which they couldn't do before. And he came to the USA in order to try and retrieve the archives of Saint Innocent, because they were being held by the American authorities. Saint Innocent is one of those evangelizers of the American land, who came very soon after Saint Herman, who's the patron of this temple here. And Father Innocent wanted to get all these archives in order to write books and to promote the life of his great-grandfather. Unfortunately, the American authorities didn't give it to him. They sort of considered it that it's their heritage as well. It's true to some extent. It would have been good at least if he could have gotten copies or something like that. Nevertheless, we got quite a bit of fantastic teaching from Father Innocent. You have to realise that he was already old, I think in his 80s, and he'd basically lived all his life under the communist yoke. It was just a couple of years since that had been freed to some extent. And therefore he understood very well how Christians under those sort of situations need to behave and what they need to do. And he took the teachings of his great-grandfather, Saint Innocent, and particularly a couple of things that you may not have come across in your spiritual readings. I hope you do spiritual readings and you read lives of saints, you read about prayer and the sacraments and all those sorts of things that you need. Saint Innocent added a couple more things to this. One of these was that in addition to all that sort of thing, we need to read good secular literature. Good secular literature. What do I mean by that? Authors like Dickens, Bronte sisters, and of course, Pushkin and Dostoevsky. I mean, Dostoevsky is just way above everybody in that respect. You have to be very selective. And why does Father Saint Innocent say that this is a thing to do? Because particularly to those who are first coming into the sanctuary of the church, this literature, particularly from the 18th and 19th century, will give them a good feel for basic human goodness. Basic human goodness. Not the sort of spiritual greatness that we find in Orthodoxy, but basic human goodness. I remember Father Seraphim Rose telling us once that he had this man who was a convert recent, and he got very involved with Jesus prayer. He's praying away 100 in the morning, 200, 500, 1,000 Jesus prayers in the morning, living in the flat. And somewhere below the flat below, one of the people there started to play heavy pop music. So this man's doing all these Jesus prayers. What do you think he does? Starts to get things and throws it. Here it is, doing Jesus prayer. learning to acquire theosis, and we're throwing things at this other person. You see, this man did not have that basic knowledge of human goodness. And just whatever he did has just wrecked up his whole spiritual life by that sort of action. So this is something for you to take away today. If you haven't read good secular literature, and we can give you a list of those sort of things that are recommended, do so. We could extend that also to good secular movies. If I mention directors like Frank Capra, for example, who had dozens of fantastic, very Christian-based movies, which you would gain a lot from, to gain this sort of basic human goodness. And there are others as well. The second thing that St. Innocent used to teach, because you may not know, some of you, but he brought many of the Aleut people in North America to Orthodoxy. So if you go and land in Alaska today, all you see is Orthodox churches everywhere, because Alaska is basically an Orthodox state and part of the USA. In any case, what St. Innocent said was, each person needs to be able to do such things as grow fruit, vegetables, plants, dig in the earth, work with the soil, work with your hands, make things from first principles, from raw materials, not like buying a kit, to make an aeroplane or something, but make it from first principles, from, something that you have to think about, cut, put into place, measure, and all those sorts of things. I find that the youth today lack this sort of thing very much in their lives. To fix a leaking tap, for example. If you know how to do it, it's a very simple thing. Who knows how to do it? Or to fix a PowerPoint. Who knows how to do it? St. Innocent went to a lot of extent with the Aleut people to teach them these skills. St. Innocent himself made very complex machinery. He was a clockmaker on top of all the other things that he did. Carpentry, metalwork, all those sort of things. I don't know what they do in secondary schools today. In my days, they certainly taught things like woodwork and metalwork, and we still have some of those products that we made when I was a teenager. Good, solid things made from first principles, not from kits. These things you need to take away, and if you're not doing that, if you're not working with the earth, if you're not making things like that, start it. And if you can't think of anything straight away, think about it, because you will learn how to do it. The other thing that he said was to write. Write like St. John of Kronstadt always said, to keep a spiritual journal. And you write in that journal, not necessarily every day, but whenever something hits you that strikes your heart or your soul, write it down. And it's your private journal. You don't show it to anybody, ever. Keep it to yourself. After a year, you look back. What was I like a year ago? You sort of, gee, I really changed here, Hopefully, anyway, for the better. So that's another thing to do. Spiritual journal, working with your hands, reading good secular literature and movies in addition to all your spiritual material that you do. We heard from the epistle today about St. Paul talking about being caught up in the third heaven. He says he knew a man, but of course he's talking about himself being that. And he says, whether in the body or out the body, I don't know. And what I saw, I can't relate. What was St. Paul experiencing? What we in Orthodoxy call transfiguration, theosis, Christ-likeness, deification. That's what St. Paul was experiencing. He had a taste of that. Just like the three apostles who went up to Mount Tabor with Christ also had an experience of that. And these sort of things come about through spiritual life and through nothing else but spiritual life. You cannot attain those states. Yet that state is the whole reason for our Christianity. In a few words, is to obtain Christ's likeness. Everything that the Lord did, the incarnation, the way he taught, the crucifixion, the resurrection, the ascension, all of that, the bringing down of the church, was all geared towards this one objective, and that's for us to obtain Christ's likeness, which starts here, continues for eternity in the heavenly realm. That's a very big calling, but that is really the whole aim of Christian life. And Saint Innocent has a book, which I think is available, the text of that is available free on the internet, called Indication into the Kingdom of Heaven. Indication of the path into the Kingdom of Heaven. Check it out, because he goes through all this sort of step by step. It's not a very big text, a few pages. You know, you could read it in half an hour with any problem. And he concentrates also on that same sort of thing that the Holy Fathers who teach noetic prayer and all the sort of spiritual struggles, he also refers to that and reminds us of that. And the one thing that is necessary for that, without that you cannot do this sort of work. And that again is very simple. Keep the commandments, all commandments and all the Beatitudes. It's that simple. Of course, keeping them is not that simple. That's a real struggle. But nevertheless, that's the way to theosis. That's the way to deification. That's the way to transfiguration. You know, it's very much bound up with the secret life in your heart. Think about it, the secret life in your heart. Give you some examples. A woman comes to church, stands there, and she's crossing herself and whatever. Another woman walks in, she sort of glances at her, and inside her she says, "What is this trying to do? Look what she's put on, what she's wearing. Where'd you get that sort of gear from? Who does she think she is?" You know, that's what God hears. You might as well say it out aloud. Because to the Lord, that's what he hears from you. Not your prayers, but what your heart is saying. You know, another lady walks in. This woman says, "Oh, look at her shoes. Who is she? You know, what's going on? Is she trying to seduce men or something? You know, shout it out aloud, because the Lord hears all that from your heart." And you know, men stand there. You think it doesn't belong to them as well. You know, and a woman walks in. What do you think they're doing? Checking them out in various ways. You might as well shout it out loud, because the Lord hears those words. Not your prayers, but what is deep inside of you. That's why that spiritual life is so important. And in every single Christian confession, other than in Orthodoxy, it's been stolen from them. Nobody does spiritual life. You know, they all do these sacraments and this thing, and you know, they read the Bible, all this. They come to confession. You know, Orthodox comes to confession. They say, "Well, what's on your heart?" "Oh, you know, you didn't fast all that well." "What else?" "No, sometimes I don't say the prayers." "Okay, what else?" "I sworn a few times." "Anything else?" "Not really, I think that's pretty much it." Okay, so the priest says the prayers of forgiveness and reconciliation. The person goes away and says, "Oh, I'm now so worthy of communion. You know, so worthy of communion now. I'm pure. I'm sinless." What they don't realise is that you are immersed in that sin that you don't even see on account of your fallen nature. You don't even see it. And you have to battle with that in order for it to be exposed to you or to do something about it. And you won't do it without spiritual life, because it's the spiritual life, the life in your heart, which will open that up to you. All those books, you know, Philokalia, all those high books from the Holy Fathers of the deserts and whatever, are all geared towards this. The ladder of divine ascent, all that is all geared towards that. that life in your heart. The secret life that you experience, God sees, and maybe nobody else does, but it manifests itself as either transgression or as something favourable to the Lord. That is the aim of our Christian life. All the rest, the communion, sacraments, coming in here, the prayers, are all just part of getting to that stage. And if you're not doing that in your life, then you're not really living a Christian life at all. It's all external. You know, you might as well go and join some sect or something that does the same thing. As we read in the Gospel just now, the highest calling for us, the Lord said, love your enemies. How hard is that? You know, in all the so-called isms and philosophies of the world and all those sort of things, nobody has that, to love your enemies. Look at Islam, for example. Love your enemies? Kill your enemies, slaughter your enemies, execute your enemies is their thing. God said, no, love your enemies, do good to them. See the difference between true Christianity and everything else. We focused on this Alaskan scene today because of St. Innocent, and there is another very important American saint, Peter the Aleut, Native American from Northern America, who in San Francisco was martyred by the Jesuits. They tortured him, they cut off his fingers, burnt him, did all these sorts of things in order for him to renounce Orthodoxy and accept the Pope. But he didn't. And you know what? When you bring it up, because we have icons of him and everything, there's all this text coming out that this person didn't exist. That's how they tried to cover that all up. Well, you know, we were in Alaska several times and we knew some of the relatives of St. Peter. So what do you mean he doesn't exist? Who's writing all this material of slander against something so true like that? You see, there is a battle, even amongst people who call themselves Christian, to force upon them untruths. And if they had spiritual life, they wouldn't do that, because they would realise what that's all about. May we, through these great saints, Metropolitans of Moscow, St. Innocent, St. Peter the Aleut the Martyr, St. Herman of Alaska, whose temple this is, and of all the saints, have mercy on us and save us. Let us say with our whole soul, with our whole